Mr. Director, congratulations on your nomination. My point of emphasis as I start here won't be on trying to identify some areas of principled disagreement. I suspect if we worked hard enough, we might be able to find some of those, but I want to emphasize the importance of having a smart, experienced individual as our next Secretary of State. Based on my time serving with you in the House of Representatives, you've certainly checked those boxes. And we also need a leader who's credible, not just with our own president, but with leaders around the world. And you've also checked that box. So I want to encourage you, and I anticipate supporting you. In our March visit in our office, we spent much of our time talking about crises around the world. You'll certainly be immersed in these should you be confirmed. But we also spent a lot of time talking about communication, the level of responsiveness of the State Department. And I was quite candid with you about my unhappiness from time to time with the Department of State and the level of responsiveness I'd seen over the last year or so. Though it has significantly improved, there's been an uptick in dialogue between the Department and my office, and I think this committee more generally in recent months. We have an Article I responsibility, which you understand very well. This is the Committee of Jurisdiction that oversees the State Department. And I just want to get you on record here. You indicated in your prepared statement that you were prepared to pick up our calls on the first ring. I think that's exactly the sort of message that you ought to be sending. So to be clear, do you commit to ensure that the Department of State provides timely and responsive answers to me and my office?
Senator, as a CI director, I adopted the Leon Panetta model, which was more time, more cups of coffee, have real interactions, whether you agree or disagree with a particular member, to do that and to provide the committee the documents to which they are duly entitled as elected officials. I'll promise to do that for you.
That's refreshing. Thank you. Mr. Director, do you agree that the U.S. national security, our national security, depends in large measure on a vibrant and growing economy?
I do.
In your prepared testimony, you mentioned China's systematic policies of stealing our intellectual property, of forced technology transfer, and associated activities. You also mentioned just moments ago that China is using mostly economic tools against us to achieve broader geopolitical, geostrategic ends. Do you believe these policies by Beijing have already undermined, and if they continue unabated, will continue to undermine our ability as a country to realize our potential for economic growth, to incentivize investment in key technologies and key sectors of our economy, and to sustain the financial wherewithal that is required to defend our country and advance our values worldwide?
Yes, Senator, I do. I think those risks are real. I think they're on us today. That is, I think we're in the midst of that. This is not some future risk that's presented to the country. I think we have to confront it today. Most directly on point is the enormous amount of intellectual property that has left the hands, sometimes taken, sometimes coerced out of the hands of U.S. companies. The imagination and creativity of the American workforce has delivered it, and the Chinese have taken it away from us. We have to develop a robust set of tools. CFIUS here, domestic, there's a bunch of tools that we need, and to do that well, such that we can prevent that from continuing to happen in the future.
Well, relatedly, earlier you spoke of the need for, my words, a China strategy. So my sense is you believe we need a whole-of-government, well-coordinated, informed, strategic response to China's coercive, illicit, and deceptive economic and trade practices. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator Young.
Well, I do too. And that's why I intend to introduce this month some legislation on this very topic. I'm going to require, through this legislation, working with my colleagues and the administration, the periodic production of a national economic security strategy. I'd welcome the opportunity to work with the administration, you in particular, and any colleague who shares these goals. I think we'll get this across the line. It's needed now more than ever. Do you believe that a U.S. response, Mr. Director, to China will be more effective if we assemble a multilateral coalition of allies and key trade partners who also have suffered due to Beijing's economic policies and trade practices to create a unified international front to apply maximum pressure on Beijing to achieve our objectives, as opposed to a merely bilateral dynamic, which I perceive we have now?
I agree with that. I mean, conceptually, if we can get the countries of Southeast Asia, more broadly in Asia, and others to jointly set up a framework that achieves what it is that you've described as our objective, we are far more likely to achieve most or all of it.
Mr. Director, given the challenges we confront with Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, and beyond, do you believe our nation's need for effective diplomacy will decrease in the coming year or two?
Senator, it seems unimaginable, but if I'm good enough, right? If we can, I am hopeful that we can begin to take some of these challenges away. I was mindful. I had all the former CIA directors in, nearly all of them attended, and to a person, they'd been there, some of them 20 and 25 years ago. They said, "Mike, the stack has only gotten longer. We haven't pulled one of these problem sets from the pile, and we need to do that. We need to start to solve some of these."
So your response, though humorous, actually is something I'd like to shine a light on, because the previous occupant of this Secretary of State position once indicated that part of the rationale behind his funding request for the Department of State was that there would be less of a need on account of highly effective near-term diplomacy for as much funding. Now, any large organization here in Washington or beyond can be made more efficient, and we can identify funding decreases that might be made. But I would regard it as a risky strategy to assume that your highly effective diplomacy is going to be a strong rationale for funding cuts. Are you operating under the premise that highly effective diplomacy will lead to lower funding requests in the international account moving forward?
No. When I said that, I am optimistic. I'm hopeful. This is the task to which we're engaged, but I can't see anything in the 6 or 12 or 24-month time horizon that would permit us to have any less demand for diplomatic resources.
Strikes me as responsible. Thank you, sir.